Slater Crusaders. Thanks so much for being here on our latest special, COVID-19. The battle continues. We have some amazing guests lined up. I really want to focus on people behind the scenes who are making us prosperous and making us be able to make it through this, whatever the heck this even is. So we're going to talk with people involved with the production of things that we don't think about, but that are essential to our livelihoods here. And we're going to talk with a trucker as well and get some insight into the hurdles and the challenges that they have. And we're going to celebrate them as well because they are absolutely, should be considered frontline workers. Also coming up next, we're going to talk to a colonel, retired colonel from the Army. He's an infectious disease expert. He was in Southeast Asia in 2003 during the SARS outbreak. So obviously he's going to have some incredible insight coming up for us as well. I just want to set the stage here a little bit and hopefully get our minds and get our hearts right going into the weekend here, because it's a long week. It was a long week, and I think we're going to have many more long weeks to come, because we are in the last 100 years, these are unprecedented times, nothing like this. And I think my most important message is I think we got to give grace to everyone always. This whole thing should be a massive exercise in grace. So the dictionary definition is courteous goodwill. That's what grace is, courteous goodwill. Comes from the Greek word that means to bring delight, joy, happiness, delight, joy, and happiness. But it's this essence of you're bringing it to someone else, right? You're bringing delight and joy and happiness to others. That's grace. Now in Christianity, it's got another twist to it. The idea is that grace is everything God gives us that is undeserved. And that is everything. Everything we have is undeserved. Undeserved is the key. And that's what we therefore need to give to other people. It's undeserved. So someone wrongs you, but you don't retaliate, even though they do deserve it. You give them undeserved respect. Someone takes a roll of toilet paper out of your hands at the Costco. You get angry. I would. But instead of getting angry, you assume the best. Maybe we assume that this person, instead of, this person stole from me, maybe we assume that person has a family member with a major immune system issue and they need to stock up as much as possible so that they can leave their home as infrequently as possible. Is that true? I don't know. Probably not. But that assumption is undeserved. They don't deserve that grace that you're giving them, but we need to give it. A grocery store doesn't have the food you want, grace. A governor makes the wrong move when they're issuing whatever proclamation they're issuing, give them grace. The president misstates something in a press conference or has a course correction and made the wrong call yesterday, we give them grace. There's a model out there that doesn't include one variable that they probably should have. I mean, we can either criticize all day, every day, and just get more stressed out and angry, or we could just give grace all day, all the time. This is an amazing opportunity to work out that muscle that in normal circumstances, like last month, you didn't need to give grace. We should have. I should have given more grace, but you didn't need to. You could get by without. I don't know if we can get through this without it. It's essential now. And what a great time to work it out, and truly work it out. Like if you did 100 push-ups a day throughout this quarantine, which is maybe something we should do. But if you did 100 push-ups a day, you'd come out of this whole thing jacked. We need to give grace 100 times a day. And if you do that, you'll come out of this a master of it. You'll be a master of giving grace. This quarantine it's a rocky training montage of grace. All day, every day. I love this line from Paul Zahn. He said, grace is unconditional love towards a person who does not deserve it. It's a popular idea in our modern world is karma. It's a Hindu, Buddhist idea. We all know it. And it's odd, I don't know how, but somehow it found its way into like American, Western culture and thought. So karma means you get what you deserve, right? It comes back around. Grace is the opposite of karma. It's not getting what you deserve. Isn't that funny? You grow up your whole life thinking about karma and all. We casually have said like, oh, it's karma, it'll come back. Well, grace is the opposite. And that's what we need to be practicing. There's a good line in Titus. It says, for the grace of God has appeared that offers salvation to all people. It teaches us to say no to ungodliness and worldly passions. There's been quite a diversion of worldly passions lately. When we can't work, we're not buying the things we normally were, right? A lot of these worldly passions that we built up on a pile of sand have come crashing down recently. But grace teaches us to say no to ungodliness and worldly passions and to live self-controlled, upright, and godly lives in this present age. That was written a long time ago, but present age means today, and it means even in a pandemic, we can still live life in a way that is self-controlled, upright, and godly, but only if we give grace. Now, the key word to me in that scripture is the word teaches. This is a time where we can use to allow God to teach us grace. Unless maybe you don't need it. I don't know. Maybe you're like, Slater, I'm not stressed at all. Really? You're not stressed? Like a little bit? I could tell it with my family. Even the way I react to my kids lately. It's like, what did I just do? Like, why did I pop off like that? We all got like this latent stress, and it's okay. You gotta give yourself grace too. It's gonna get worse before it gets better. Medically, economically. Saw the job numbers yesterday. 6.6 million claims last week. That's on top of the 3 million from the week before. It's 10 million in a week. Like, that's gonna have ramifications well down the road. It's gonna get worse before it gets better. A little background on that. The worst week ever in America, it was during the Great Recession, 2009, and then I think it was like 1982, and it was about just under 700,000 jobless claims, 700,000 unemployment claims in a week. We're at 10 million in 2 weeks. So knowing that, it feels weird to say the sentence, "We'll be stronger in the end," right? It doesn't seem possible, but it's true. It's potentially true, I should say. James 1. I think it's one of the most hopeful and challenging pieces of scripture, and we should all put this to memory. It says, "Consider it pure joy, my brothers and sisters, whenever you face trials of many kinds." Pure joy, not consider it kind of a bummer, or with a little bit of an okay attitude, or like a stoic kind of like ignore it and like power through. Like, it's not pure joy when you face trials of many kinds, because you know that the testing of your faith produces perseverance, and let the perseverance finish its work so that you may be mature and complete, not lacking anything. I guess we could go either way with this whole thing, right? Like, it's very possible this whole thing spirals out of control, like socially, and I don't think so. I certainly hope not, because I know if we work through it properly, if we appreciate our truckers and our nurses and our doctors and our infectious disease experts that we're going to talk to next, and the people who work at plastics manufacturing companies that make the plastic bottles for the Purell that we need way more of. We need to, if we appreciate these people and we work through this whole process with gratitude and grace, then I think we will come out more mature and complete. Let's give you an example. This happens on an individual basis and then nationwide as well. We shared the story the other day on my show about a doctor in Brooklyn, wildly overwhelmed. And he had a Jewish patient. She was 100 years old. And he wanted to send her home so that she could die at home, but her blood pressure dropped and he had to keep her. And her son kept calling the doctor, wanting to know how she was doing. And he's like, "Listen, man, she's 100 years old with pneumonia in both lungs. She's not good." And the son wanted to talk to her. And the doctor said, "No, he's like, I can't. I'm too busy. I got like 100 things going on here." I said, "No," and they hung up. And remember, all these COVID patients are suffering alone. And in some cases, they're dying alone. So the son called back 10 minutes later to find out how she was doing. And he's like, "Listen, your mom's unconscious." And he said, okay, can I say a prayer? Can I tell her a prayer? It's very important I say a prayer. And the doctor said, "Okay, fine." Out of respect for the 100-year-old woman, okay. So he put the phone on speakerphone, put it up to her ear, and he told the guy, okay, go. With an essence of hurry up. And the man started the prayer of the dead, and he began to cry, and he could barely get it out. And at that very moment, time stopped. And the doctor could start to see things that he didn't see before because he was too busy, he was too rushed. And he looked down at this 100-year-old woman and saw numbers tattooed on her arm. She was a Holocaust survivor. And her son was praying the prayer of unity. And the doctor later wrote about this moment. He said, that moment woke up some emotion in me that I had forgotten about. I want all of us to have that sort of experience where emotions wake up in us that we forgot about. He said, time slowed down, and he said, I felt restored to myself. And when the man was done, he thanked me, and then I said thank you to him. Right? That story, that's a trial. That's a trial that produced perseverance, that finished its work, and made that doctor, and hopefully all of us by hearing it, a bit more mature and complete. Let's keep that our goal. Coming up, we have a retired colonel in the Army, infectious disease expert, and 2 unsung heroes that are helping us get through this. COVID-19, the battle continues. More next. Spread the word. Slater Crusaders, welcome back to our special COVID-19. The battle continues. Gosh, we have an amazing guest, retired Colonel Michael Lewis, an infectious disease expert with the U.S. Army. Colonel Lewis, how are you, sir?
I'm doing great, Mike. How are you doing?
Man, really, really glad you're here. I can't wait to get your insight here. So let's go back to 2003. So you were in Southeast Asia in 2003 when SARS broke out. What can you tell us about that experience? What was noteworthy there?
Well, it was interesting. I mean, it was this new virus and nobody knew what to expect. It came out of China. I don't recall exactly what particular area out of China, kind of leapfrogged through Hong Kong and Hanoi, and then just sort of went out to the world from there. It was, back then it was a brand new virus. We're so used to the influenza and year to year change that the influenza does. And sometimes the influenza makes a big leap, like the 1918 Spanish flu or, the Hong Kong flu and things like that. Well, this was very similar. The world had really not known about coronaviruses leaping into man. And so it was very scary, but it seemed to burn out, as the summer came on, and everybody expected it to come back the next year, and it really didn't.
Oh, interesting. Okay, so let's just jump there from SARS to a different coronavirus, this one. What are the differences? And we've been talking on my show recently about the CDC director and others talking about it coming back for a second spike in the fall. So what are the differences, and do you see this potentially coming back again?
Anything at this point is conjecture. And so, back in 2003, we were convinced it would come back the next year, and it came back very limited, but not anything to speak of. Nobody even talks about it, really. So I don't think we know at this point, but there is differences between the original, we'll call it the original SARS, and the COVID-19, which is a variant of SARS. And it's a similar virus, but yet it's one that the world has not seen. And the biggest difference is the virulence, the ability, the infectability, and the lethality of it seems to be not hugely, but slightly worse than what SARS was. But when you talk about going through billions of people, that can make a big difference.
Yeah. What do we do with the fact that we don't have the data, like the newness of this? It's so difficult to calculate anything. You can't calculate death rates. That's impossible because we don't know how many people have it, let alone how many people are actually dying from it even. So what do we do? Like, as an infectious disease expert, what do you do with knowing so little?
Well, you set out and you try to do the studies as best as possible. There's a couple of different ways. One is, people that are coming into the healthcare system, you want to be testing them to get some idea of the rates that are going on. But there's also, you want to be going out into the population and testing people who aren't having symptoms. So you want to do more of a random population level thing and try to interpret, you're not going to be able to test everybody, obviously. But if you go out and you test 1,000 people walking down the street, for example, you'll get an idea of how many people actually are carrying the disease, and then you can extrapolate that to bigger populations. Part of the problem is the actual testing itself. I'm not on the front lines today, so I'm not privy to knowing what's what we call the sensitivity and the specificity of the testing. How good is the testing that we're using? And that's a big issue as well.
Yeah, okay, so I read something, and I'm ballparking this, but it was some tests, and there's so many different types of tests, so, right, and everyone's doing different tests. But there was something like 40% of the time it tested positive, it was wrong, and like 18% of the time you tested negative, it was wrong. It was something like that. And I remember seeing that, I was like, oh, is that good? Like, is that, like, what's an acceptable amount of right or wrong for a test like that,
well,
generally?
if you think about it, HIV as an example, which is, obviously a virus, would that be acceptable? 18% of the time it's wrong. And so no, I mean, you really got to get into the high 90s for those terms.
Wow.
As close to 100% as you can.
Wow. Scientifically, what's the most difficult thing about getting an accurate test?
Well, part of it is, are we basing it on, RNA or DNA fragments that are circulating in the blood? So direct measurement. But what's the viral load? Can you determine so the higher the viral load, the more likely it is to actually be symptomatic in somebody, and the more likely it is to be transmitted to somebody. And then there's the whole immune reaction. And so, when we have a virus or any kind of illness, we have an immune reaction, and we can actually measure that as well. But they're very different parts. So the immune reaction may not occur for 1, 2, 3, 4 weeks after you are infected. And so it becomes this dance of, which is the best test at what period of time. Jeez. Right after somebody gets exposed, right after somebody starts to have symptoms, or maybe even down the line in long-term immunity.
Gosh, that's so much more complex than what we hear people say, just, we need to test, right? But I mean, you're an expert, you'd be like, well, test what? Test what, when, how, right? There's so many different variables there.
Well, there really are. And so, one of the things that we have to realize, this is just basic computer language, garbage in, garbage out, right? So what is the data, what are the data that we're working with? And so, if you're not putting good data into the system, then we really have no idea what's going on. And
with projection,
really,
absolutely.
Right. And so it starts with how good are the tests and what are they testing?
Wow. Okay. What is to you, and again, we know so little about this, but we're learning more every day. What to you is maybe the oddest thing about COVID-19, the virus itself, and maybe the most concerning to you, something that you would definitely be looking at as the days go on?
Well, oddest. That's an interesting. I've not had that question. I'll think about that one for a second. But the most concerning thing is just the predilection for attacking the respiratory system. So people that have underlying asthma, for example, can be at greater risk. But some of the things we don't think about, and I see, and I saw there was that was circulating on social media. This person died and they had no underlying health problems. And I saw a picture of this person, and that person had to have been 100 pounds overweight. Yes. I'm sorry, if you're 100 pounds overweight, you have underlying health issues. So again, it gets back to that, not just the testing, but what are our definitions? And so it may be that we're seeing more people dying with COVID-19 than we are seeing dying from COVID-19 because of underlying health conditions. I mean, look at the amount of obesity that we have in this country. It's out of control. So how much underlying disease are we really facing?
Wow. And that is a more unique issue in America than any other place in the world.
It
Wow.
is. When you look at, they talk about the difference between, say, South Korea and Italy. Well, in Italy, the cultures are totally different. The Italians are very close, and but there's also an older population. They smoke more. I mean, so there's different variables that make people and even populations and cultures at more or less risk.
Wow, that's so interesting. And we're gonna have to go back and look at all that when all this is over, whenever that is. But because people say that, and I think people will conclude, I want to get your take on masks, right? They'll look at the number of cases in different countries, and they'll say, oh, these countries wore masks, these countries didn't wear masks. So I want to talk about masks, but there's also a ton of other variables there too, right?
Well, there really are. And so on the mask, you can argue both sides. There's both sides of the argument, right? So most people don't know how to properly wear a mask, and they don't realize that if they're wearing it for too long, the moisture of your breath is making the mask wet, which then attracts things. And then if you're not careful with how you take the mask off, you may inoculate yourself. It may be that, if the mask isn't fitted properly, I see people out grocery shopping with N95 masks, right? N95 mask means that it filters about 95% of things that we know. But they have to be properly fitted. And when you go through training, there's ways to test to see if it's properly fitted, because there's different sizes, and the average person doesn't know that. And so somebody that's got a scruffy beard and mustache and wearing the mask that's not even over their nose, is it really doing any good, or is it making them feel like they're protected when it actually is making them more susceptible? But on the other hand, masks, you look at the Asian populations that it's become part of their culture. Masks are probably more important for people who have the virus, and they may not know that. So it keeps potentially, the biggest thing about the mask is it keeps people from infecting others. It doesn't work as well. I'm not saying it doesn't work, but it doesn't work as well to protect you personally from getting it. But certainly those asymptomatic carriers, it may decrease the spread from there. And of course, if you have symptoms, you shouldn't be out and about anyway.
Yeah. When did you, like just watching everything happening, and you're out of it now, but when were you like, oh, this is a thing that we need to pay attention to?
Really when when it was becoming a deal in China back in, the end of January, that's when I started to get worried, because viruses don't respect borders. You're talking about the winter holidays, with Chinese New Year coming soon after that, and the amount of travel that the world now experiences. People flying all over the world for Christmas or Hanukkah or the winter holidays. These things travel really fast, and so I started getting worried when I started hearing, a new virus jumped from animals into humans in China.
Wow. What is something that us, not infectious disease experts at the U.S. Army, need to be keeping an eye out moving forward, right? So if one day in a week or two, we see a story about this, are your alarms going to go up maybe even more than they are now? What should we be on the lookout for?
It's really complicated. New York is very different than, say, Washington, D.C., which is different than Des Moines, Iowa. So I think one of the problems is that we are trying to take the situation in one particular area and apply it to the rest of the country, and it's not really applicable. It could be that a couple hospitals are getting slammed in Seattle or in New York, but on the other side of the city, the emergency rooms are, sitting there empty. And so this whole thing is really, really complicated. So my biggest concern is that we're generalizing too much, and maybe we need to be a little bit more focused on where the problems are. Unfortunately, then it may become like whack-a-mole. Where's it popping up next? And we need to have that flexibility to be able to adjust. And this is hugely complicated.
Wow, and I think we need that humility going forward, that it is complicated, it's not that easy. Let me wrap up here, we got about a minute. Give me some good news. Good news you've seen, good news you're looking forward to.
Oh, you know what, I do have some good news. I'm following one particular friend who is tracking, using the data available, and they're tracking not the number of cases, not the number of deaths, but they're actually tracking the acceleration or deceleration. Yes. And so, which is very different. You don't hear about that. And the percentage increase is decelerating, which means that we really are getting close to the peak. And the further it decelerates, of course, and then hopefully then we'll start to see a decline. That's when we know we're on the other side of the curve. But so the good news is it appears the percentage are decreasing. So it feels like, at least by the numbers, it looks like we're getting more towards a peak.
I'll take it. Retired Colonel Michael Lewis, infectious disease expert at the U.S. Army. Colonel, please, can we talk again in the coming days, weeks? This is not over, so I'd love if we could get some more insight.
Absolutely. Assuming I don't get called back to active duty, I'm available whenever you guys are.
Beautiful. Colonel, thanks so much. Appreciate you.
Thank you.
More coming up on COVID-19. The battle continues right here on The First. Mike Slater, spread the word. Slater Crusaders, welcome back to our special COVID-19. The battle continues. We're all thinking about and praying for our frontline workers, and there's a lot of them, and a lot of people I think people are having a greater appreciation for, who are always keeping our country moving. And I think no one fits that bill more than our truckers. I used to have a radio show on Sirius XM Patriot, and almost all of our listeners were truckers. And that's where I got my appreciation. And every time I go into a grocery store, it's been this way for years, I think of all the people who drove all the things we're looking at to that store nonstop every day. I've never gone to a grocery store, except the last few weeks, and not been stacked with food, just jam-packed always. And I'm like, how does that happen? Who does that? It's our truckers. And they're keeping our country moving throughout this as well. Desiree Ann Woods, she's the president of Real Women in Trucking. Miss Wood, how are you?
I'm doing good. Thank you for inviting me.
My pleasure. So, first of all, give us a scope. Let's do pre-COVID. Can you give people a scope of how important truckers are to our country?
Truck drivers are what keep America running. In the truck driver community, it's pretty well known that truck drivers could turn off this country in 3 days' time with the turn of a key. And that is something the public really has never been aware of until this pandemic. Now they actually see what that means. And it's so important that we recognize these invisible workers, because they make magic every day when you walk into wherever you shop, and there's things right there for you to buy at your convenience in your neighborhood. You don't have to drive to a rail yard and pick it up. Now people are starting to realize, where does that stuff come from that's in the store?
In the end, if people have a greater appreciation for truckers and that process, which is a miracle, it's unbelievable how it happens flawlessly all the time. It really is. And now we're seeing some slight disruptions and people are freaking out, but goodness. Okay, so what are some of the hurdles that truckers are facing throughout this COVID pandemic?
Well, the truck drivers, many of them that are company drivers, they are not paid for waiting. They're only paid to drive. So there's a lot less traffic. So that's nice. They're not sitting in traffic. When you're getting paid by the mile, and this is a thing that affects drivers, and after this crisis, I hope people will support modernizing the way truck drivers are paid. Getting paid by the mile when you're sitting to load or unload sometimes can take 10 hours, sometimes can take 5 hours. So that's all unpaid time for a lot of these company drivers. So I posted a picture of a line of trucks outside the gates of, I think, Procter & Gamble, waiting to load toilet paper when this all began. That line is probably going to keep those drivers there for about maybe 5 hours. I've talked to drivers who had to stay overnight. Their load was supposed to be ready today, and then they had to stay the night, and it won't be ready till 4 o'clock tomorrow afternoon. That's all unpaid time. The other thing is a lack of they don't have a lot of access to shopping either. There's very few places they can park to shop. So not only are the places that they usually can park cleaned out, and they can't shop either, the truck stops, people are going to the truck stops and cleaning those shelves out. So they're having difficult times getting hand sanitizer, masks, bleach, wipes, things to clean down, and they're also being forbidden to use bathrooms at a lot of the places. In the first couple of days, we were starting to see truck stops wanting to close their showers. Fortunately, the FMCSA, the regulating body over trucking, wrote a letter to the truck stop lobby and said, we're all in this together. You guys need to help out. So we are seeing some of the showers reopening, but still the food services closed real early, drive-through service only, and no tractor trailer can fit through the window. So that was an issue, trying to get them to realize the driver's going to have to walk up to the window. You have a policy against that. What's our solution? So every day we're having to overcome these hurdles that pop up because people don't really think about truck drivers. They think about, delivery drivers.
Truck drivers need to be considered frontline workers and prioritized as much as doctors and nurses. I don't know if some people find that controversial or not, but we've said a million times, I think the three most important things of keeping social stability throughout all this is electricity, water, and food. And if food and essential goods can't get places, then that's not going to work, and that's going to create a lot of problems, maybe even worse problems than the virus itself. In your understanding, are these last couple of weeks and maybe the weeks to come, are there more things being shipped around now or fewer things? I mean, obviously there's probably not as many Easter decorations being shipped, but does that balance out with more toilet paper that's being shipped? What do you know about amounts of things?
There is a lot more pharmaceuticals getting shipped. I mean, even though you mentioned the doctors and the nurses, the things that doctors and nurses still come by truck. So if there's ventilators getting shipped, those are coming by truck. If there's masks that get found that are getting shipped, they're coming by truck. So everything relies on the truck driver being able to take that from point A to point B to where it's needed. They have to stay healthy in order to do that. With regards to, them getting the waiting times and the access, the bathrooms has been kind of a big thing. Not getting the permission to use it, having to. In fact, yesterday one of my members called me and was driving down Interstate 15, where I'm currently located in Nevada, and said, there's a tractor on the side of the road not attached to a trailer, and it has a COVID-19 sign in the window. And what is that driver supposed to do there? We're an hour from town, and what are they going to just die in the truck alone? I was like, wow, let me drive out there. And I took everything that I have out there, but the tractor was gone. So it does make a concern of these drivers that don't have a support system in all these different towns they go. Where do they go? Who do they call? What do they do with the trailer?
Yes.
Some have pets that ride with them. Is there foster people that foster animals that could step up and let it know. There are some support groups that have formed on Facebook for drivers to find information. The truck drivers do.
Yeah, it's so difficult. I just want to cut you off, Desiree, because I got one last question, and it ties into this. Can you give us some more stories or what would happen if more drivers get sick? In your experience, are drivers staying relatively well and healthy, or are they getting sick?
I've talked to 3 so far that have gotten sick. They don't have confirmed, and I saw one that posted that they were confirmed that they did have the virus. If more get it, I'm hoping they'll self-quarantine. I just put a post up about this on we have a new organization called Truckers Emergency Assistance Responders, CDL-TIER, and I put a suggestion list for people in the supply chain and even local communities. Compile a list if these drivers need to self-quarantine. Are there motels they can go to? What hospitals should they go to? What should they do with the trailer? These kinds of things. Give them PPE. Obviously, they're afraid to go home. Some of these drivers stay on the road for like 2 months at a time. Then it's time to go home, and they don't want to go home because they have kids, grandchildren, elderly parents, so forth. So it is very stressful for them.
Yeah, absolutely. Please, Desiree, hey, we have to run, but please pass on our appreciation to truckers, and hopefully that appreciation lasts well beyond
Yes.
this whole COVID
Yes.
thing.
We
Wonderful.
appreciate
Thank you.
you getting the word out.
Yeah. Thank you. Desiree Ann Wood, Real Women in Trucking, and please keep helping these truckers, because none of those things you just brought up I ever thought of. So only you and people like you are able to think about those things. So thank you.
Yes. Thank you so much for letting us
Desiree
share
Ann
this.
Wood. My pleasure. Thank you, Desiree. That's it. COVID-19, the battle continues, and it continues because of people like the man we talked to earlier from the plastics company, the truckers out there, and of course the doctors and nurses, everyone on the front lines and everyone behind the scenes. This is what America does best, and this is how we're going to get through it, because of everyone stepping up like that. And that should be the most encouraging thing of all. Right here on The First, we'll always have the latest for you. Mike Slater, spread the word. Slater Crusaders, welcome back to our special COVID-19, The Battle Continues. I'm always fascinated by the behind the scenes of things, and things that we especially take for granted. But they have an essential role in what we're doing right now. I want to go to Alex HOFFER. He's the Chief Revenue Officer of HOFFER Plastics out of Chicago. Alex, how are you, sir?
Good, very well. How are you doing today?
Wonderful. So what do you guys normally do? What are you normally making at HOFFER Plastics?
So normally, we are an injection molder of small plastic parts, primarily for 5 markets: food packaging, medical, automotive, consumer industrial, and appliance. But things are not normal right now, are they?
No, I'd say. So give me an example of a thing that you guys would make, like a plastic thing.
So you can see 4-piece valves we make for Coca-Cola, for example, in fountain drinks. We do caps and fitments for squeezable pouches that moms can, as they're sheltering home, they can buy for their kids to squeeze out yogurt. We do things kind of behind the scenes things in automobiles, so things in your door, latches, and that sort of thing, and then appearance parts, whether it's blenders and knobs and appliances. So a little bit of everything.
I love that. Like that. So you mean those? So we have a couple little kids. So you mean those little food pouches? They're plastic, yeah. And then the top of them has like that hard plastic top that you can like suck it out. Like you guys make that plastic top?
We are one of the companies worldwide that do that. Absolutely.
I love that. So that's no one pays attention to that. No one pays attention to all these behind the scenes parts that are so necessary, but I'm so grateful you guys do. Anyway, sorry, I can geek out about that all day. So that's what you guys normally do. What are you doing now? What have you decided to do instead?
So we are seeing a dramatic shift in our business, as most manufacturers are. So we are working currently on different projects, whether it's working with automotive customers to transition to injection mold parts for ventilators. We're working diligently with our medical customers to launch a new product that would be used in hospital for swabs. We are seeing a huge uptick, as Americans shelter in place with parts that we make for water closures. And then we're doing a lot of hand sanitizer pumps and caps. And so we're seeing, just a huge shift in terms of the demand for certain products that, normally are, potentially slowing down this time of the year, and demands in other areas that we normally haven't done, anything in, like ventilators.
Yeah, that's so interesting. So you think about the Purell hand pumps, right? Everyone's like, hey, Purell, you guys just need to make more Purell. And even if they were like, okay, we can, but we don't have enough bottles to put them in. We don't have enough, we don't have any pumps to pump it out. And that's where you guys step up and make that whole supply chain happen. I think that's so awesome. What's a water close? Go ahead.
What's funny is that right now, I just got an email right before I came on the air from our executive vice president, who is driving parts up to a company called Aptar, to get new Purell parts approved and on a new mold that just transferred into our facility due to this crisis. So, this is changing by the minute for us.
Wow. And I love the executive vice president hopping in the car, making the delivery himself. Like, that's so cool. And it takes everyone to do this. It takes it sounds dramatic, but it's not like a wartime effort, wartime mobilization to do it. What's a water closure, real quick?
So we just make an assembly that goes on kind of the big jugs of water that people are buying. I was going to say hoarding, but keep buying them. We'll take the business. And I get it. We want to have good, clean, drinking, safe water to drink, and so that's what we're doing for that.
Okay, interesting. So how difficult? What are some of the hurdles have been in transitioning from things you used to make into the things you're making now, like equipment wise, and like I don't even know like how your business works, but like the molds. Like, is it hard to go from making one thing to another thing? How difficult is that?
Yeah. So what we've done is we've worked with some consultants, and we found, like, for example, we found a mold maker up in the Michigan area outside of Detroit that could turn around a mold in less than 2 weeks. And so one of the gifts, and I use that word with a little bit of pause because this is a tremendous, unprecedented crisis. But one of the gifts of this is that it's going to force companies like ourselves to innovate. And the resistance that you would normally feel with regards to, you can't build a mold in 2 weeks. Well, now you're finding out how you're finding a way to do it because out of necessity. Necessity is the mother of innovation, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so unbelievable. And like, again, on the parts, like, you can tell Purell to make more, but you guys need to make more. And then you also need your suppliers to do whatever they need to do. And I'm sure they have suppliers that need to do what they need to do as well. There's so many people necessary to keep this whole thing running.
So our business is in Illinois, and I think that's the thing that's been, that I've gotten a little bit passionate about, because I feel like the family's gotten a little bit of criticism on social media about how are you guys still open? But we are the company that makes the things that you complain about when they're not there at the grocery store. And there are several other companies, small businesses around the United States that you've never heard of before that are, quote, essential businesses. And that's why, we are taking calculated risk showing up, but we are practicing, what I refer to as the physical distancing, because we want to be 6 feet apart, but we don't want to be socially apart. So physical distancing, but social connecting. And we're all in on this. This is a crisis.
So good.
Do whatever it takes.
Yeah, you talk about companies you've never heard of, like you mentioned Aptar. Like, who's ever heard of Aptar? But I'm so glad that Aptar is a company, and I'm glad that HOFFER Plastics is too. Last question about the ventilators, because similar theme. The president could say, hey, General Motors or whoever, you got to make ventilators now. But then they're going to come to you and say, well, you guys, we really need you to make this plastic part of the ventilator. What role in the ventilator are you guys responsible for?
So right now, straight shooter, we worked on a project, you just mentioned one, and as you can read in the Wall Street Journal and other publications, that project was brought in-house. We're currently working on another one. We aren't yet today molding any parts for ventilators, but I'm here to tell the world we can. And I believe people like us need to be doing this because it can't be all under one roof. And our production capabilities, we're running this weekend for several of the aforementioned customers, like the hand pumps and the medical. So we're willing to run 24/7 through this crisis.
Alex, that's so good. I'm so grateful for you. Please give my best to all your employees who are showing up. Like I saw a video the other day of nurses applauding the cleaning staff at a hospital, right? So it's this beautiful image of like these people who don't normally get the recognition. But I want your employees to also get the recognition that you guys are absolutely essential. And I promise you that when I go to the store and I pick up a bottle of hand sanitizer or whatever it is, I'm going to look at not only the company that's listed on the front, but I'm going to think of HOFFER Plastics and all the other companies, truly dozens, if not hundreds of companies behind every single product that we pick up from the store. So please pass that on to your employees.
Will do. They're the heroes. They're the true heroes.
Beautiful.
For sure.
Awesome. Really good. Alex, thanks for your time, sir. Keep up the good work.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
I love that so much. Yeah, my pleasure. Wow, what a great special. It's so much fun. Glad you guys are here. The battle indeed continues. We got still a long road ahead, but with people like Alex and all the people there at HOFFER Plastics doing what they need to do, everyone doing their part, I think we'll make it. I know we will. COVID-19, the battle continues. Mike Slater, right here on The First. Spread the word.